Ampatawashte Medakiepi, Wachiampiwi, Machiapi, Lena Shichango Lakota Imataha, Chante Washte, Nape Chayuzapi. Greetings, friends and relatives. I'm Cheryl Crazy Bull, the president and CEO of the American Indian College Fund. I welcome you to this speaker series that the College Fund is doing in support of our student activism. I'm a citizen of the Shichango Lakota Nation and a lifelong educator. Today, with the pandemic and all of the public outcry that has inspired the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen that the activism of Indigenous people is critical. The upcoming election and census bring us an opportunity to move out of the crossroads of being left behind. We are seeing a lot of changes go on right now, important changes like with the mascot issue and with the case law in the Supreme Court in McGirt versus Oklahoma. Before we get started today, I want to take a few minutes to gather in prayer, to ask the Creator to give us guidance, to help us to have clear minds and strong hearts during this time. I pray for all of our people in our communities. I ask that the Creator help them get the resources that they need, and for each of us to be present and as generous as possible in helping people as we get through these really challenging times. I especially want to pray for our leaders because we know that they have difficult decisions to make, and we admire and respect the work of our leaders, and we ask the Creator, we ask Nkashla to give them the strength that they need for the work that they're doing. Midakuyasi. Right now, I see a particularly great opportunity for Native people to use our voices to create greater visibility for our communities. We need to be promoting equity for our people while reinforcing our sovereignty. And with that in mind, we've created the 7-part speaker series on Indigenous activism. These 7 seminars are really an opportunity for TCU students, faculty, and staff to discuss the different issues that we're facing in our community. We have a full calendar of webinar topics that you can find on our website under the advocacy page. I encourage you to go there and look for our upcoming events. Now I'd like to go on to our program. Today we're joined by a person that I'm proud to be the auntie of. Sarah Eaglehart is going to present on Conversing about Race and Justice, You Can Do It. As Indigenous peoples, we find ourselves in really challenging conversations, and we find ourselves subjected to aggressions that we aren't really sure how to respond to. And Sarah has a long history of working in this space. She's a member of the Oglala, or a citizen of the Oglala Lakota Nation, an Emmy award-winning storyteller focused on uplifting Indigenous peoples worldwide and lifting up our issues. She's also the CEO and co-founder of Return to the Heart Foundation, a grant-making organization that empowers visionary Indigenous women and leaders. I'm really proud to be able to introduce Sarah. I know I have even more that I want to share about her, and I need to get it out of my file here. So from 2015 to 2019, Sarah served as the CEO of Native Americans in Philanthropy, and that's a very important organization that helps bring the attention of philanthropy, which is the private sector donors and foundations, to increasing investment in Native communities. But I actually first met Sarah prior to that when she was working for the Episcopal Church and helping the Episcopal Church really address the need for inclusion and activism in the space of racial justice. In 2014, Sarah was awarded the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development's Top 40 Under 40. That's a very important recognition of the contributions of our emerging leaders. In 2017, she received the American Express NGen Leadership Award as an emerging leader under 40. This was through the independent sector, and we were so proud as Native people for her getting that recognition and really bringing her voice to the critical issues that need to be faced. And of course, most fun, in 2019, she won an Emmy for Outstanding Interactive Media as a consultant producer for Crow the Legend with Baobab Studios and John Legend's Get Lifted Studio. So we were really happy that Sarah had that opportunity to do that. She's also currently very active with the Women's March. She has a bachelor's degree in American Indian Studies and also one in print journalism from Black Hill State University and a master's in business administration, an MBA from the University of Phoenix. Real important right now, Sarah is currently co-authoring a book on leadership, healing, and advocacy. And I love this title, Warrior Princesses Strike Back. She's doing this with her twin sister and psychotherapist, Emma Eaglehart White. This book will be published in 2021 by the Feminist Press. So welcome, Sarah. I'm going to turn it over to you now to share your thoughts. Once Sarah is done with her brief presentation, we'll have a question and answer discussion period for all of you participants. You can use the Q&A or chat box. We'll monitor that and give Sarah the opportunity to respond to any issues or questions that you bring up. And then I also have a few questions in case we have a lull in the conversation. So welcome, Sarah. I'm really happy to have you join us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Ampeti Washe, Wambli Shinawi, Amachiapi, Chante Washe, Napechi Zapeye. Good day, everybody. My Lakota name is Eagle Shawl Woman, and I greet you with a good heart. And, I've been thinking a lot about this presentation and sort of, when I wake up before I have to do a presentation, I often will light sage or I'm quiet because I think of what I have to say. And really recently, my nephew and my nieces and, have been asking me questions about my career path and asking me questions about how I got to where I am right now. And of course, it's a long story. It's not like a straight line story. And I think that in my life, I often follow creators. So I think that if somebody tried to track me in my story of my career, it would look much, much differently than what they might expect. and I think that's literally because I spend so much time having creator in my life and with what I do. So I'm going to start a PowerPoint presentation and I'll try to get through it and stop on some points. But I do want to share just a little bit from my background so that you see some of the trajectory. Okay, let me see if I could figure this out. I might not be able to share. I think I'll let the team try to figure it out. I'm just getting a sharing option. There we go. Okay. So why don't we go to like sorry for the technical difficulties. It just has my name and where you can find me on that title, on that panel. That's actually a picture of me and my sons. Brendan is on the left and Aaron is on the right. Aaron is now 24 and Brendan is 20, almost 21. So yeah, I'm the mama of two grown young men who are, both pursuing college. Also, one wants to be a chef. The other one is still trying to, they're both still figuring it out a little bit, but my other son is looking into business. So that's really exciting. And I always want to name my kids because, obviously my sons are a lot of the inspiration behind, everything that I do. And I was also a young mom. So just FYI, I always say I accidentally, maybe creator had a plan, had a baby right before going to college. It wasn't expected or, I got pregnant. And so I ended up going to college pregnant. And then I actually finished college pregnant with my other sons, but I was a complete overachiever. And that's what I tell people is that I started college pregnant and I ended pregnant and then went on and got an MBA. And I think I've been, just an overachiever in that way. So I like to tell young people, you know, if that happens, you can do it. You can still go to school. You can find a way. You can make it happen. And so here's a picture of me and my twin sister. You know, I'm an identical twin sister. I'm twin A, if anybody is tracking that, and my sister is twin B, so I'm the oldest. And then that's a picture of my mom, Emmy Eagleheart. And yeah, this is my grandma. So I'm probably going to slow down a little bit here because I want to be able, if we could go back to the picture of my mom, would be great. So one of the big things that I talk about, you know, is that one of the stories of my life is really about being this young little girl and about how, you know, I faced a lot of adversity at a young age. And, you know, my mother was a cop. She was a young mom. She was a single mom. Our father wasn't in our lives. Our grandfather on our dad's side was actually a tribal chairman, Al Trimble. And, you know, but our mom was mostly a single mom. And when we were 7 years old, we had a car accident where she lost her memory. So we were driving on the Rosebud Indian Reservation, and two drunk drivers ran us off the road on New Year's Day in 1985. So we were very, very, very young. And, you know, of course, in those days, nobody knew how to talk about mental health. No one knew how to tell us that our mom was just different and that she was really, you know, what they told us were things like, oh, she's going to get better. Oh, she's, you know, like her nerves are going to grow back together. Like she's going to remember. But really what ended up happening was, you know, my earliest memories is of my mother not remembering who I was. And so as you can imagine, as a young little girl, that just opens up so many questions that you're just trying to figure out. and I think looking back now, you know, I was definitely one of those hero children. You know, I was trying to take care of my younger sister and my little brother. And, you know, and I felt like I had a lot to carry at this young age, which, you know, is good and bad. You know, it's, you know, kids shouldn't have to feel that at a young age. But also, you know, it contributed to a lot of the way that I interact and my overachieverness and like what I do today. So it's not all bad. My mother actually, she's, you know, she still struggles with her memory and her mental health, but she's doing well. She lives actually with my grandma right now. And it's been nice to, you know, over the years, create a different relationship with her and be able to really reconcile, you know, a lot of the feelings that I had as a child. But it definitely took some intense work because, you know, luckily my twin sister became a psychotherapist, and she then in our 20s we decided to she started diagnosing me. And it's, you know, it's funny because she would say things like, you know, oh Sarah, she's like, you know, I think you might be codependent. And I was like, you don't know everything. And then I would then my A-type personality would go look it up in a book and be like, oh, that's what it is. Like, let me go find a counselor and take care of this. So like I was one of those people, and went back to her. And my twin sister said, okay, so this healing thing, how long is it going to take? You know, and she would say, she laughed in my face, of course, most therapists do, because, you know, going through your own trauma or healing from it can and probably will take all of your life, because each level you end up unpeeling another level. But I'm happy to say, you know, right now I just have feeling like so much peace and understanding about like my own, you know, my mother's inability to care for me at a young age. And also, you know, having the support of my community. So the next slide actually shows my grandma. So I wanted to share about her because, you know, when I was working at Native Americans in philanthropy, we actually worked with Native American scholars to come up with these protective factors. and so when I look back at my life, you know, and I grew up on the edge of, like in Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in Lake Creek District, which was right next to Bennett County High School, Bennett County, which was a mostly white county at that time. And I lived in the tribal community right outside of that little town, Sunrise, Lake Creek District, like shout out. And my grandma was really the person that was there for me. So despite having all of the crazy stuff that happened in my life at a young age, you know, where my mother wasn't able to care for me, my father wasn't in my life, I had my grandma. And my grandma, you know, she didn't do it on purpose, right? This was just who she was and what she knew. She had grown up in the country. She grew up with both of her parents, her stepfather and her mother, and grew up in the country. And so she jumped in. So even though, you know, our mother wasn't able to care for us, throughout our lives, we had so many people in our family that had jumped in to take care of us. So, you know, when we talk about the extended kin bond and networks, I had that. I didn't have to worry, you know, when my mom couldn't take care of me, my grandma was there. I didn't have to worry because, you know, so her name is Mary Rose Crazy Thunder Dillon. And my aunties were also there. So all of my mom's sisters, so she has 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And so they were all there too. And so they all, you know, we were one of the oldest kids in our family of that generation. We were the oldest. After, you know, one of my aunties had, you know, several, had struggled with, you know, having children herself. And so my mother's brothers and sisters really took on the role of being mother and father to us. And so I was very fortunate because, you know, while my own mother and my own father couldn't care for us, you know, I had this extended family, and they made sure that we understood our cultural connection and our connectedness. My great grandma was alive in my family up until the age of 13. So I got to spend a lot of time with her. She was a very devout Episcopalian, actually. And she was this, you know, presence in our family. My grandma was a Head Start cook, and she was, you know, didn't make much throughout the year, but she worked really hard to care for all of her family members. And, you know, and she was also a community leader. So in many ways, you know, she was one of the people who was helping if somebody needed help. So she definitely showed us all of these protective factors that I think are so important for people to know now, because she did this unknowingly. Every single part of it, making sure we went to Sundances and powwows. You know, we were dancers from the time, you know, we were young up until our teenage years. And, you know, obviously she cooked us really healthy food. She still makes wasna and bapa soup, and, you know, those are really important. And, you know, we were also just taught to be, you know, really great young people. The next slide shows, you know, the Lakota value system, which is actually layered on top of this. So as a young, in my around 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, you know, I was actually introduced to a group that was a mentoring group. And they taught us these values, but like in action. And so obviously I saw these values with my grandma. You know, I saw that my grandma was praying all the time. I saw that they talked about respect a lot. Respect is actually very important for Lakota people. And that meant things like, you know, like you can speak up with truth, but you can also speak up with respect. You know, you don't have to name call, you know, that you can treat each other with respect. So even if you don't agree, you can treat each other in a good and caring and compassionate way. And, you know, the other thing was also having humility. And, you know, so obviously being, you know, we were always taught that, you know, no one's better than other. I also had a twin, so I was constantly thinking in the we mindset. And, you know, and I did come from a humble background. You know, my grandma made she made less than 15,000 per year, like annually. So that's a very humble background that I grew up in. And, you know, but I actually really, you know, didn't realize how poor I was, because, you know, I was so rich with just family and culture, and we had food, we had what we needed. But, you know, the wisdom that she also passed on in making sure that we learned all of these values. And the one thing that I will say about Lakota people, and even in my learning, is that, you know, there are a lot of protocols and nuances that you learn as a young person. And so growing up within my community on the reservation is something that I am very grateful for, because my family, we're very experiential teachers. So they're not going to tell you X, Y, and Z. They're going to show you how to do all of these values. And that's important for you to see how it's acted out in your daily life. And I think that, you know, if you look at my life, you'll see that a lot of my my action and my work comes back to these Lakota values, because this is what I was taught that was so, so important. The next slide shows, you know, my twin sister and I. This is actually during our naming ceremony. And if you look behind us, you'll see some hands. Those are actually our grandmothers that were behind us. You know, you can't see them, but, you know, those are our hands. And when I look at this picture, I think about how much I was so loved by my community, right? Like, we're sitting on star quilts that my grandma made, because my grandma's a sewer, so she does that in her spare time. We, you know, have shawls that are behind us. We have embroidered pillows that are on our laps. Like, we have, you know, our beaded moccasins and our plumes. And, you know, and we were so young, but they were showing us and they were honoring us in the community and showing that we were loved, that we belonged, and that they honored us as like young women and as chekbas, as twins. And chekba means belly button. You know, and twins. And so when you think about that connection and how we're connected to our mothers. And I also want to say that when I reflect back about Midakuya Oyase, you know, we are all related, we are all connected. As a Lakota person, you grow up saying this at the end of your prayers. And as I've gotten older and I've reflected back on that, I said, you know, this is probably why I have such a strong connection back to helping my community, and why I always think of, you know, to be a good person is in my life, or what I was raised with, was that you had to give back to your community. You had to find a way, whatever you did in your life, finding a way to give back to your people was, you know, the thing that was going to, you're going to fulfill your life's purpose. And that's the lessons that I learned between all of these value systems and, you know, Midakuya Oyase. So the next slide shows, you know, I want to jump into this because, you know, most of us didn't know at a younger age, you know, because all of this has been left out of our school books, you know, we didn't grow up understanding where people saw us in the society. But, you know, Martin Luther King uplifts it, saying, you know, our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the Indian, was an inferior race. Even before there were large numbers of Negroes on our shores, the scar of racial hatred and had already disfigured colonial society. From the 16th century forward, blood flowed in battles over racial supremacy. We are perhaps the only nation which tried as a matter of national policy to wipe out its indigenous population. Moreover, we elevated that tragic experience into a noble crusade. Even today, we have not permitted ourselves to reject or feel remorse for this shameful episode. Our literature, our films, our drama, our folklore, all exalted. Next slide. So this was my experience of how that was lived out in my high school. So Bennett County had the mascot named the Warriors. And my sister and I had gone to their homecoming ceremony that they held every year, where there was a big chief, a medicine man, and 5 warrior princesses. And most of the time, the people that were chosen were non-native, or, you know, maybe had some native blood, is what I will say. And we as young women, we worked really hard to be accepted. I'll say that, you know, we were in band, we were in choir, we were cheerleaders, we were in every possible club you could possibly imagine, right? But, you know, after we were being taught these lessons about leadership through our mentoring groups, you know, we were taught about our value system. We went and we saw this ceremony when we were juniors, and we had been talking about it every single year that it would happen. We would go, oh my God, is nobody going to do anything about this? We would look around, you know, like, can anyone see how wrong this is? And of course, nobody was saying anything. And you think about the community at that time, you know, there was a lot of racial tension. There was a lot of mistrust. You know, people were quiet because they had to work there. They had to live there. They didn't want to rock the boat. But my sister and I definitely rocked the boat because we felt like we had to say something. And so our junior year, we just after watching the ceremony, we agreed that we were going to protest. We had no idea how to protest. There was nobody that we knew that had ever protested, by the way. We were like, oh, you make a sign. And so you get ready, you make your sign. And so our first year, we had maybe a dozen people that came and helped and supported us. And it says, simply respect, Lakota culture is respect, too much to ask. See, this was at this young age, we were upholding respect. Of course, it was difficult. We were young people, we were standing up. People, even in our own community, said, what are they doing? They just want attention. The principal on our first day of school called us in on our senior year, called us into his office, and he said, you know what, people are saying that you're just mad that you're not going to be a warrior princess, and that's why you're protesting. Well, that says a lot, right? Like, that the principal, was bringing up all of these, racial things, even in that statement, that we were mad that we weren't going to be a warrior princess. And so obviously we looked at him like, you're crazy. Most people thought we were going to go away, that we would go to college, we wouldn't come back. We actually came back every single year for 4 years. And every year the groups just got bigger and bigger, where American Indian Movement joined us, as well as school groups from reservations on the Rosebud and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and both tribes actually passed resolutions in support of us. And we had a lot of guidance. So I was really lucky that when we stepped up and we asked for help, people came and they helped us. But you had to take that first step into stepping up and asking for help. Next slide. And so I just want to name this because I think most of us don't, get a chance to understand these oppression, right? That all of the behavior that was happening at our high school that senior year, that we were there, we were name called, people threatened to throw rocks at us. We had people writing editorials about us in the local newspaper saying that we just wanted attention. And, in actual reality, my twin sister and I are actually pretty introverted. I feel like I'm an ambivert because I'll turn it on when I have to turn it on, but I'm actually really just happy not doing anything because that when you have to turn it makes me really tired to be on. But so we didn't do it for attention. In fact, we both didn't want the attention, but we felt like we had to stand up. So understanding different levels of oppression are important because, this goes across all systems, it goes across all structures, it goes on a personal level, on a collective level, and understanding that these different behaviors are where the oppression comes in. So a lot of the behavior that I received as a young person, sometimes it was overt racism, sometimes, most of the time, it was microaggressions. I had my college counselor told both of my sister and I, when we wanted to apply for the Indians into Medicine program in Med when we were 16, he told us we couldn't do it. Actually, he's actually told us that we didn't have the grades and we could never make it. And I mean, this was our high school guidance counselor telling us this, and we walked out of there and we're like, what? He's not even going to help us. This is his job. His job is to help us, and at least help us apply. But at that, we knew we couldn't rely on him. And so we filled out the paperwork ourselves and we both got into the program. And then I also got into the journalism, the Native American Journalism Association, because I wanted to be a journalist at that young age. So we all experience this, but it's important to understand that. I went on and my first job right outside of college was working at Viejas Casino. I worked in marketing and advertising. I started out actually in human resources for 6 months, transferred to marketing and advertising, and I was in that department for 4 years. I loved it. I thought it was awesome and great. And then I ended up finding myself working for the Episcopal Church. So the next slide shows this next level of work that was really important. I'm sorry, that's hard to read there. It says, this was the year that I actually started working for them in 2009. The Episcopal Church became the first church to repudiate the doctrine of discovery, aka manifest destiny, which means the inherent right to conquer and rule a people. It became my job when I was working there. Mind you, my career path was not to work at a church. I went that way because I felt that I was being called to it. I felt that, you know, that Creator was asking me to go work for the church. And I listened because I understood in my life that you need to listen to when Creator is asking you to do something. Otherwise, it'll keep coming up over and over again if you don't. And so when I went to work for them, I was in my late 20s. And I started out as a program officer for Indigenous ministries. And then within 3 years, I ended up as a team leader or actually 3 months. I held my job as program officer and was also a team leader for diversity, social justice, and environmental justice. And the Episcopal Church, I was on the staff of the presiding bishop, which meant that that I was also interacting with 16 countries and 2 million people. So my job became to educate people about the doctrine of discovery and manifest destiny. In 2012, the World Council of Churches also renounced the doctrine of discovery, acknowledging the error of their ancestors. And however, unlike Canada, we still have yet to have a truth and healing decade in the United States. And I think it's time. I think we're ready. So the next slide shows you some of my work that I did. Oh, I think we skipped one. Or maybe, no, I think I might have missed one. Oh, sorry, I might have mixed it up. So what I wanted to share was that, you know, in my work, what I've done a lot is I just love cultures. And so I would really wanted to like soak up every single other culture because I was just really fascinated by it. And so I spent a lot of time with other people and their cultures and their groups. So when I worked for the church, I went to places like Australia, New Zealand, I went to Bolivia, I went to Ecuador, and it was all around building relationships with these communities and also advocating for them and for their needs and for what they wanted. And when I was young, I remember people saying things like, you know, oh, well, that priest would have made a really great, you know, medicine man and medicine woman or something like that. But in my experience, you know, my job was to walk alongside them at that time when they're trying to discern their next steps, their calling. And so when you're walking alongside them, you see that actually a lot of, you know, their pathway is up to them and their reconciliation with like what Creator is calling them to do. And I always think about like how, you know, fortunate I was to be with them while they were walking that path and to just, you know, offer resources or support. Because these spiritual leaders take on so much, and you see them even today taking on so much in our communities. This photo is actually a photo of last summer. My partner and I, Kevin Killer, you see him down there on the left-hand side, we went to Ghana for the 400-year return, which was the 400-year return, the slave ships that went from Jamestown, Ghana, that went to Jamestown, Virginia. And we got to go with the NAACP and spend time with their tribal council and visit the Door of No Return and Cape Coast Castle. And I just think it's important because sometimes as Indigenous people, Lakota, you know, especially American Indians, we get kind of caught up in our own ethnocentricity and, you know, thinking of our own tribes and our own culture. But for me, I've always seen similarities, and I've always wanted to lift up the parallels between our experiences. And even in going to this castle, before we even went to the castle, they gave us this medicine to put around our necks because to protect us. And many of these people, you see them, they were going there and they were going to find out who their tribes were for the very first time. Many of them had no idea where they came from. They didn't know their tribe, but they were doing a DNA test where they could actually connect you to your relatives over in Africa and know actually what community that you came from. As a Lakota person, you know, observing all of this, you know, I was observing their chat room. I was observing their excitement, their sadness. honestly, I just felt so much compassion for them and their story, because I felt like, oh my gosh, the disconnect, that they've had. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I know I've been through like a lot of struggle and trauma, but I'm also so fortunate that I have my culture and I had the ceremony. So when bad things happened, we went back to prayer, we burned sage, if someone was sick, we had ceremony with, our spiritual leaders. And, so for me, I just felt so much compassion for African Americans who are still reconnecting with their own tribal roots, which is why I do feel that Indigenous worldview is important, especially for those that were fortunate enough to grow up within their own community, tribal community. I mean, I think that we have a lot to share and to teach. And so that's why, I think even at this point, next slide, that we are, that we think back about like Crazy Horse, and, he said things like, I see a time of 7 generations when all colors of mankind will gather. And in that day, there will be those among the Lakota who will carry knowledge and understanding of unity among all things, and they will come to my people and ask for this wisdom. We see this today. But I think even more so because during this pandemic, everybody is reevaluating their lives and how they live it, even myself included. I returned back to the Black Hills because I basically meditated one morning, and I'm not a big meditator, by the way. Was like, one morning was like, I should meditate. And I saw myself in the middle of the Black Hills, actually, in one of our sacred places, Peshwa. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm supposed to go home. And this was right before we knew COVID was